5 years after the Galactic Council hearing, Zara stood on the bridge of the starship New Ketha, watching as they approached a small blue-green world in an unexplored system. The ship was a joint project between humans and refugee species, designed specifically for establishing new colonies far from the politics and conflicts of the core worlds. "Atmospheric composition looks perfect," reported Jine from the science station. Her brother had recovered completely from his ordeal in the mines and had become one of the colony ship's lead agricultural specialists. "Gravity is 92% of Earth standard. No signs of intelligent life, but plenty of plant and animal species." Zara smiled at the excitement in his voice. After years of living in space stations and temporary settlements, the prospect of a real world to call home was intoxicating. "Any recommendations for landing sites?" "3 potential locations," Jane replied, highlighting areas on the main display. "This coastal region has excellent soil and fresh water. The climate should be ideal for Cathari physiology." Captain Martinez, who had taken over from the aging Captain Rodriguez, nodded approvingly. She was part of the new generation of human officers who had grown up in the integrated communities of Haven Station and its sister colonies. "Let's take a closer look. Zara, you have the final say. This is going to be your people's new homeworld." It still felt strange to be called a leader. After the council hearing, Zara had somehow become the unofficial representative of the surviving Cathari, scattered across human refugee settlements. There were only about 3,000 of them left, all that remained of a once great civilization. But those survivors had decided they wanted to try again, to build a new Ketha that honored their past while embracing the lessons humans had taught them. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, Zara felt a mix of emotions that would have overwhelmed her years ago. Excitement, fear, hope, and a deep sadness for all those who should have been here but never would be. Her parents should have seen this day. Her grandparents should have been here to offer wisdom about starting over, but she wasn't alone. Around the bridge, humans and refugees from a dozen species worked together with easy familiarity. Marcus stood beside her, older now but still carrying the same quiet determination that had impressed her during her rescue. Dr. Sarah was in the medical bay, preparing for potential injuries during landing operations. Even Thex was aboard, having become something of a legend among the freed gladiators who now served as security for the refugee colonies. "There," Zara said, pointing to a valley near one of the coastal regions. "That's where we'll build our city." The valley was perfect, sheltered from storms, with a river running through it and hills that reminded her of the landscapes of old Ketha. More importantly, it was large enough for growth. This wouldn't just be a Cathari colony. Other refugee species would join them eventually, creating something new and unprecedented. The landing operations took 3 days. The colonists worked with practiced efficiency, having learned from the establishment of previous settlements. Temporary shelters went up first, followed by power generation, water purification, and communication systems. Within a week they had a functioning town, but the real work was just beginning. Zara spent her days meeting with planning committees, resource allocation groups, and cultural preservation societies. The Cathari wanted to maintain their traditions and identity, but they also wanted to incorporate the best ideas from other species they had encountered. "We're not trying to recreate old Ketha," she explained to a gathering of colonists on their second-week planetside. "We're trying to create something better, a place where being different is celebrated, where helping others is more important than helping yourself, where no one is left behind or forgotten." The human influence was obvious in everything they built. The city plans included spaces for multiple species with different environmental needs. The government structure emphasized cooperation and consensus rather than hierarchy. Most importantly, they included provisions for helping other refugees who might arrive in the future. 3 months after landing, they received their first test. A badly damaged ship emerged from hyperspace, carrying survivors from a world that had just been destroyed by raiders. The ship was barely holding together, and its passengers were in desperate need of medical attention and supplies. "We don't have much to spare," admitted Chen, who was now serving as the colony's resource coordinator. "Our own supplies are still limited." But Zara remembered Marcus's words from years ago. When people stand together against injustice, everyone becomes stronger. She made the decision that would define their new world. "We help them," she said simply, We find a way. The rescue operation became a colony-wide effort. Families donated food from their personal supplies. The medical team worked around the clock treating injured refugees. Engineers jury-rigged repairs for the damaged ship. Within days, the new arrivals were integrated into the growing community. Word of the colony's hospitality spread through the refugee networks that humans had established throughout the galaxy. More ships began arriving. Not just refugees, but traders, explorers, and even some official representatives from established worlds who were curious about this unusual experiment in multi-species cooperation. A year after landing, New Ketha had grown from a small agricultural settlement to a thriving city of over 20,000 beings, representing 37 different species. They had established trade relationships with neighboring systems, founded an academy for interspecies studies, and even created their own small fleet of rescue ships. But the real measure of their success came during what became known as the Harvest Festival. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to celebrate the colony's first anniversary, including several members of the Galactic Council who had opposed human involvement in galactic affairs. Chancellor Vorak, now even more ancient but still sharp, addressed the celebration. When I first met the humans, I thought they were naive idealists who would quickly learn the harsh realities of galactic politics. I was wrong. He gestured toward the bustling city around them, where beings of dozens of species worked, played, and lived together in harmony. They didn't learn to accept our harsh realities. They taught us to imagine better possibilities. As the celebration continued into the night, Zara found herself standing alone on a hill overlooking the city, watching the lights twinkle below. Jane found her there as she had known he would. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "Old Ketha, I mean." Zara was quiet for a long moment, thinking about their destroyed homeworld and all the people they had lost. "Every day," she admitted. "But I've learned something important. Home isn't just a place. It's the people you choose to care about and who choose to care about you." She looked down at the city they had built together. Humans and Cathari, Threxians and Corvanis, former slaves and former free beings, all working together to create something that had never existed before. "The humans saved us from slavery," she continued. "But more than that, they saved us from despair. They showed us that losing everything doesn't mean you can't find something new worth fighting for." Marcus appeared beside them, as quietly as he always did. After all these years, she could read his emotions as easily as those of her own people. He was tired but satisfied, proud of what they had accomplished but already planning for future challenges. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing Jane's question. Zara thought about the scared, broken being she had been when they first rescued her from the slave ship. Then she looked at the thriving community below, full of beings who had found hope after losing everything. "Only one," she said. "I wish my parents could have met you. They would have loved the humans." Marcus smiled, and in that expression she saw all the warmth and determination that had first given her hope in her darkest moment. "I think we would have loved them too." As the three of them stood together watching their city sleep, Zara realized something profound. She was no longer loveless and alone. She had found family among the stars. Not the family of her birth, but the family of her choice. And together, they had proven that even in the darkest universe, compassion could create light. The humans had taught them all a simple but revolutionary truth. Everyone deserves to be saved, and everyone can choose to save others. It was a lesson that would ripple outward through the galaxy for generations to come, carried by those who had learned that love was not about blood or species or homeworld. Love was about choosing, again and again, to care for one another, and in that choosing, they had found their way home. 6 months after the Kalos rescue, Zara stood before the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime, representing not just the surviving Cathari, but all the refugee species gathered at Haven Station. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with tension as delegates from across the galaxy prepared to hear testimony about human activities in their space. The hearing had been called by the Valeth Empire, who claimed that human terrorist operations were destabilizing trade routes and interfering with legitimate business practices. They wanted humans declared an enemy species and banned from galactic civilization. Zara wore formal robes in the deep blue of her people, with silver threading that caught the light as she moved. Beside her sat representatives from 15 other species, former slaves who had found freedom through human intervention. Marcus and Captain Rodriguez sat in the gallery, not allowed to speak for themselves under council rules that prevented unrecognized species from addressing the assembly directly. The Loveless prosecutor, a tall figure in gray diplomatic robes, had spent the morning presenting evidence of human crimes, ships destroyed, facilities damaged, economic losses, and what he termed theft of valuable property, meaning the rescued slaves. The humans represent a clear threat to galactic stability, the prosecutor concluded. They operate without regard for established law, attack legitimate vessels, and steal private property. They must be stopped before their violence spreads further. Several council delegates nodded in agreement. The hegemony had powerful allies and extensive trade relationships. Many species profited from the current system, even if they didn't directly participate in slavery themselves. When Zara rose to speak, the hall fell silent. Her voice carried clearly through the amplification system, reaching every delegate in the massive chamber. Honored delegates, my name is Zara of Ketha. I stand before you today not as a representative of one world, but as a voice for all those who have no world to call home. She gestured to the other refugees beside her. We are the survivors, the remnants of civilizations that committed no crime except existing in the path of conquest. Our worlds were destroyed not for military advantage or resources, but simply because we were weak and others were strong. The Cathari ability to project emotions through her voice was working. She could feel the mood in the chamber shifting as delegates began to understand the reality behind the prosecutor's legal language. The prosecutor speaks of property theft. But when did living beings become property? When did consciousness and free will become commodities to be bought and sold? Her voice grew stronger. If I am property, then every being in this chamber is also property. If my brother's life can be traded for profit, then so can yours. A murmur ran through the assembly. Some delegates looked uncomfortable with this line of reasoning. The prosecutor speaks of law and order. But what law permits the destruction of entire worlds? What order benefits from the suffering of billions? Zara turned to face the Loveless delegation directly. You speak of stability, but stability built on cruelty is no stability at all. She activated a holographic display that showed images from Haven Station, refugees of dozens of species working together, children playing in safety, families reunited after years of separation. This is what the humans have built, not through conquest or slavery, but through compassion and cooperation. They asked for nothing in return except the chance to help others find freedom. The Loveless prosecutor rose to object. These emotional appeals do not change the facts. The humans have violated interstellar law repeatedly. They have attacked our ships and stolen our property. Your property fights back, interrupted Thex, the Korthani warrior who had defeated the Loveless champion. He stood slowly, his massive frame commanding attention. I was your property for 3 years. I fought in your arenas for your entertainment. I killed for your profit. His voice carried the weight of barely controlled fury. Tell this council how many beings like me you own. Tell them how many worlds you have destroyed to fill your slave markets. The chamber erupted in arguments as delegates began debating among themselves. Some demanded order and respect for existing treaties. Others questioned whether those treaties should protect slavery and genocide. Through the chaos, Zara noticed something important. The humans in the gallery weren't trying to influence the proceedings. They sat quietly, letting others speak for themselves. Even now, when their own fate was being decided, they focused on empowering others rather than grabbing power for themselves. Council Chancellor Vorak, an ancient Thessarian who had led the assembly for decades, called for order. When silence returned, he addressed Zara directly. You speak eloquently of human virtues, but the fact remains that they are a new species with unknown capabilities and motivations. How can we trust them with access to galactic civilization? Before Zara could answer, something unexpected happened. Dr. Sarah stood up in the gallery despite rules preventing her from speaking. Security moved to stop her, but Chancellor Vorak held up a hand. Let her speak, he said. I would hear what the humans have to say for themselves. Sarah's voice was calm but carried throughout the chamber. Honored Chancellor, we don't ask for your trust. We ask for the chance to earn it through our actions. Judge us not by our words but by what we do. She activated her own display, showing detailed records of human rescue operations. In 18 months, we have freed over 50,000 beings from slavery. We have established refugee settlements, medical facilities, and educational centers. We have asked for nothing except the right to help those who need help. But why? Asked the Chancellor. What do you gain from these actions? Sarah was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking about how to explain human motivation to beings who didn't share their perspective. On our world, we learned that everyone's freedom makes everyone safer. When some people are slaves, no one is truly free. When some worlds can be destroyed without consequence, all worlds are in danger. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from dozens of species. We're not trying to conquer you or convert you. We're trying to show you that another way is possible, a way where strength is used to protect rather than exploit, where differences are celebrated rather than feared. The Veilith prosecutor tried to regain control of the hearing. These philosophical speeches change nothing. The humans have broken established law and must face consequences. But Chancellor Vorak had heard enough. The question before this council is not whether humans have broken laws. The question is whether those laws serve justice or merely preserve the power of those who benefit from suffering. He stood slowly, his ancient form still commanding respect. I have presided over this council for 40 years. In that time, I have seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of civilizations. I have watched as the strong devoured the weak and called it progress. His voice grew stronger as he continued. But I have never seen anything like what these humans have accomplished. They have taken the discarded and forgotten beings of our galaxy and given them hope. They have shown us that compassion is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. The Chancellor's words carried enormous weight. Other delegates began reconsidering their positions, seeing the human rescue operations in a new light. However, Vorak continued, the concerns about human methods are valid. If they are to be welcomed into galactic civilization, they must agree to work within our legal framework. Marcus finally stood up, unable to remain silent any longer. We accept those terms with one condition. Any legal framework we agree to must protect the rights of all sapient beings, not just the powerful ones. We will not be bound by laws that permit slavery or genocide. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans were offering to join galactic civilization, but only if that civilization reformed itself to meet basic standards of decency. Chancellor Vorak smiled, the first time Zara had seen any emotion from the ancient being. I believe, delegates, that we have much to learn from our new neighbors. As the session concluded with plans for a new treaty that would recognize both human legitimacy and universal rights, Zara felt a profound sense of completion. Her people were gone, but their values lived on in her. Her homeworld was destroyed, but she had found a new home among beings who shared her belief in compassion and justice. The humans had saved her from slavery, but more than that, they had shown her how to save others. And perhaps, if they were very lucky, they had just helped save the galaxy itself from the darkness that had consumed it for so long. 2 months after the victory at Haven Station, Zara found herself aboard the human rescue ship Liberation as it approached the Kalos mining system. The mission to rescue her brother Jane had finally been approved, and she was part of the rescue team despite objections from Marcus and Captain Rodriguez. I know my brother better than anyone, she had argued. If he's been enslaved for months, he might not trust strangers. But he'll trust me. The truth was more complicated. Zara needed to see Jane again, not just to save him, but to prove to herself that there was still family left in the universe. The humans had shown her new kinds of connections, friendship, shared purpose, chosen family. But the bond with her brother was something deeper and older. Marcus sat beside her in the ship's briefing room as they reviewed the mission plan one final time. The Kalos system was heavily defended, but intelligence from human agents had revealed a weakness. Once every 3 standard days, supply ships carrying refined lithium left the mining planet with minimal escort. The Liberation would intercept one of these ships, use it as cover to approach the planet, and then extract Jane during a shift change at the mines. Remember, Captain Rodriguez said to the assembled team, this is a surgical operation. We get in, find Jane, and get out. No unnecessary risks, no heroics. Dr. Sarah, who had insisted on coming along in case of medical emergencies, raised her hand. What if we encounter other prisoners who need help? Rodriguez's expression grew pained. We save who we can without compromising the mission. I know it's not ideal, but one failed rescue helps no one. Zara understood the logic, but it still felt wrong. How could they leave other slaves behind? Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. "This is just the first mission to Kalos," he said quietly. "If we succeed, we'll have intelligence for future operations. Sometimes you have to think long-term." The plan went smoothly at first. They intercepted the supply ship exactly as predicted, disabled its communications without harming the crew, and used its identity codes to approach Kalos 3. The mining planet was a barren world of red rock and toxic atmosphere, perfect for hiding slave operations from casual observation. As they descended toward the planet's surface, Zara got her first look at the mining complex through the ship's sensors. It was massive. Dozens of extraction sites connected by transport tunnels, processing facilities, and worker barracks. Thousands of beings labored in the toxic environment, their lives measured in months rather than years. "Sensors are picking up multiple species," reported the ship's technical officer, a human named Chen. "Definitely some Cathari life signs in Section 7. Zara's heart raced. After all these months of uncertainty, her brother might be just minutes away. The rescue team consisted of 6 humans and Zara, all wearing environmental suits designed to handle the planet's poisonous atmosphere. They landed near an abandoned processing facility and made their way toward Section 7 on foot, avoiding the automated patrols that protected the mining operations. The first sign that something was wrong came when they reached the worker barracks. Instead of the scheduled shift change they had planned for, the area was eerily quiet. "Too quiet. Where is everyone?" whispered Sarah as they moved through empty corridors. They found the answer in the main assembly area. Hundreds of workers representing dozens of species were gathered in the large open space. At the front of the crowd, Valeth overseers stood guard while a figure in expensive robes addressed the assembled slaves. "A hegemony official," Marcus breathed into his communication device. "This complicates things." The official was speaking in trade standard, ensuring everyone could understand. "Recent terrorist activities by human extremists have made it necessary to increase security measures," he announced. "All workers will now be implanted with tracking devices to ensure proper supervision." Zara felt sick. The tracking devices were actually pain induction implants that could torture or kill slaves remotely. Once implanted, escape became virtually impossible. "We have to do something," she whispered urgently to Marcus. "Our mission is to find Jane," he replied, though his voice carried the same anguish she felt. "We can't save everyone." But as they watched the proceedings, Zara spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. Even at a distance, even after months of harsh labor, she recognized her brother's distinctive silver-blue skin and the way he held his head when he was angry or afraid. Jane was in line for the implants. In less than an hour, he would be permanently enslaved beyond any hope of rescue. Zara made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, she stood up and walked directly toward the assembly area. "Zara, what are you doing?" Marcus hissed through the communication link. "Something humans taught me," she replied, removing her helmet so her voice would carry clearly. "Sometimes you have to do what's right regardless of the odds." She stepped into the assembly area and raised her voice. "I am Zara of Ketha, and I claim the right of family protection under hegemony law." The entire assembly fell silent. The hegemony official turned to stare at her, clearly surprised by this interruption. Valeth guards moved to surround her, but she continued speaking. "My brother Jain is among these workers. By ancient hegemony statute, family members may claim protection rights for relatives who cannot speak for themselves." It was a desperate bluff based on half-remembered legal studies from her youth. She had no idea if such a law actually existed or if it would apply to slaves. But the official's hesitation suggested there might be some basis for her claim. "You speak of ancient laws," the official said slowly, "but these are modern times. Such statutes no longer apply to enemy combatants and criminals." "My brother was a student of agricultural science," Zara replied firmly. "He committed no crimes except being born on a world you chose to destroy." In the crowd, she saw Jane's head turn toward her voice. Even across the distance, she could see the shock and hope in his violet eyes. He started to move toward her, but Valeth guards blocked his path. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but Marcus made his own decision. He and the rest of the rescue team emerged from hiding, weapons drawn but not aimed threateningly. "We're here to negotiate," Marcus announced. "We have information that might interest the hegemony. Locations of other human operations, supply routes, safe houses. The official's eyes gleamed with interest. Information about human activities was extremely valuable to the Valeth Empire. "What do you propose?" "A trade," Marcus said. "Information for lives. We'll give you intelligence about 3 human bases in exchange for the release of the Kethari siblings." Zara realized what Marcus was doing. He was offering to sacrifice other human operations to save her and Jane. The thought horrified her. "Marcus, no. Don't trade other lives for ours." But Marcus had a different plan. As the official considered the offer, Chen and the other team members were quietly moving through the crowd, using handheld devices to disable the guards' weapons and communication systems. When Marcus gave the signal, everything happened at once. The rescue team activated jamming devices that cut off all electronic systems in the complex. Emergency lighting kicked in, plunging the assembly area into semi-darkness. In the confusion, Marcus grabbed Zara while other team members moved to secure Jane. But the plan hit an unexpected complication. Instead of panicking, many of the slaves began helping the rescue team. They had heard Zara's speech about ancient rites and Marcus's willingness to trade for lives, and it had given them hope. This way, called a Threxian miner, leading them toward a service tunnel. We know all the hidden passages. What followed was the most chaotic rescue operation in human history. Instead of extracting 2 people, they found themselves leading an impromptu slave revolt involving hundreds of beings from dozens of species. The miners knew the complex better than their guards, and years of pent-up rage gave them strength they didn't know they possessed. Zara found herself running through tunnel after tunnel, her brother's hand in hers as the sound of fighting echoed behind them. Jane was weak from months of hard labor, but his eyes burned with the same fierce determination she remembered from their childhood. "I knew you'd come," he gasped as they ran. "I never stopped believing." "I had help," Zara replied, glancing back at Marcus and the other humans who were risking everything for people they had never met. Amazing help. They reached the landing site to find that other slaves had already secured the area and were loading themselves onto not just the Liberation, but several captured hegemony transport ships as well. What had started as a simple rescue had become something much larger. As the Liberation lifted off from Kalos 3 with nearly 2,000 freed slaves aboard, Zara stood in the observation deck with her brother, watching the mining planet fall away below them. The Valeth would eventually regain control, but the prisoners they had rescued would never be slaves again. "Who are these humans?" Jane asked, still amazed by what he had witnessed. "Why did they risk so much for us?" Zara thought about everything she had experienced since her rescue. The kindness, the courage, the unwavering belief that every life had value. The humans had taught her that family wasn't just about blood relations. It was about choosing to care for each other regardless of species or origin. "They're the future," she said finally. The emergency shelter shook violently as the first Valeth weapon struck Haven Station's outer hull. Zara hugged the frightened Zilaran twins closer, while their mother whispered prayers in her native language. Around them, the remaining refugees, about 200 beings who hadn't made it to the transports, waited in terrified silence. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system. "All personnel to emergency positions. Damage control teams to sections 7 through 12. This is not over yet." Zara was amazed that the captain was still fighting. The station's defenses were no match for 3 destroyers, but the humans weren't giving up. Through the shelter's reinforced walls, she could hear the station's defensive weapons returning fire, their energy blasts creating a rhythm of desperate defiance. "Why are they still shooting?" asked Korvac, the elderly Threxian who had become something of a leader among the refugees. "They have to know it's hopeless." But Zara was beginning to understand something about humans that other species found difficult to grasp. They didn't calculate odds the way others did. When something was right, they did it regardless of the consequences. When people needed protecting, they protected them even if it meant dying in the process. Another impact rocked the station, this one strong enough to crack one of the shelter's support beams. Emergency lighting flickered and the air recycling system stuttered before resuming its steady hum. They were running out of time. Then something unexpected happened. The weapons fire stopped. In the sudden silence, everyone strained to hear what was happening. The station's communication system activated again, but this time it wasn't Captain Rodriguez's voice. It was someone speaking in the harsh, clipped tones of the Velith language. The ancient Cathari female beside Zara, her name was Lysa, understood enough Velith to translate. "They're demanding surrender," she whispered. "They want all humans turned over to them immediately. In exchange, they'll spare the refugees." Zara felt her heart sink. It was a classic Velith tactic. They knew the humans cared more about other people's lives than their own. By threatening the refugees, they could force the humans to give up without a fight. Captain Rodriguez's response came quickly, broadcast in multiple languages so everyone could understand. "This is Captain Rodriguez to the Velith fleet. We reject your terms. Haven Station will not surrender." A murmur of fear rippled through the shelter. The captain was condemning them all to death rather than hand over his people. It seemed like madness, but then Rodriguez continued. "However, I have a counter-proposal. Single combat between champions, your best fighter against ours. If we win, you leave this system and never return. If you win, we'll discuss terms." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. The captain was buying time, but at what cost? The Velith were legendary warriors, bred for combat and enhanced with cybernetic implants. No human could possibly defeat one in single combat. The Velith response came after several minutes of discussion. They agreed to the terms, apparently amused by human audacity. The combat would take place in 1 hour on the station's main docking bay, which had enough space and could be sealed off if needed. In the shelter, refugees began debating in hushed voices. Some thought the humans were making a noble but futile gesture. Others wondered if this was some kind of trap. Zara found herself thinking about Marcus and the other humans who had risked everything to save her. Now they were risking everything again for people they barely knew. 40 minutes later, something incredible happened. Marcus appeared at the shelter entrance, still alive and apparently unhurt. The refugees looked at him with a mixture of hope and confusion. "I need volunteers," he said simply. "Not for fighting, for something else." Zara stood up immediately. "What do you need?" "The Velith champion will be expecting to fight a human," Marcus explained. "But our champion isn't human. We need witnesses from multiple species to verify that the combat is fair and binding." He led a small group, including Zara, through the station's damaged corridors to the main docking bay. What she saw there made her gasp in amazement. The bay had been cleared and converted into an arena. Velith soldiers in their distinctive gray armor stood on one side, while humans and refugees gathered on the other. In the center of the space, two figures faced each other. The Velith champion was exactly what Zara expected, a towering figure in black combat armor, cybernetic enhancements visible on its arms and legs, weapons integrated into its very body. It moved with the deadly grace of a perfect killing machine. The other fighter was not what anyone expected. It was another refugee. A Korthani warrior named Thex who had been rescued from a slave gladiator ring 3 weeks ago. His people were naturally large and strong, but it was his story that made him special. The Velith had destroyed his homeworld and forced him to fight for their entertainment. He had won match after match, growing stronger and more skilled, waiting for a chance at revenge. "The terms are simple," Captain Rodriguez announced. "Single combat to submission or death. No weapons except natural abilities and what each fighter brings to the arena. The winner's faction determines the fate of this station." Zara realized the genius of the human plan. They hadn't just found a champion who could match the Velith warrior. They had found someone with a personal reason to win. Thex wasn't fighting for the humans or even for the refugees. He was fighting for everyone who had lost their world to Velith cruelty. The combat began without ceremony. The Velith champion moved with mechanical precision, its cybernetic enhancements giving it speed and strength beyond normal biological limits. Its integrated weapons fired energy blasts that scorched the deck plating. But Thex had advantages too. His natural Korthani strength was legendary, and years of forced gladiatorial combat had taught him every dirty trick and desperate technique in the book. More importantly, he fought with the fury of someone who had lost everything, and finally found a chance to strike back. The battle was brutal and magnificent. The Velith champion's weapons left smoking wounds in Thex's hide, but the Korthani warrior's massive fists cracked armor and bent cybernetic limbs. They grappled and struck, neither giving ground, both drawing strength from sources deeper than mere physical power. Zara found herself gripping Marcus's hand without realizing it. her emotional sensitivity overwhelmed by the raw determination flowing from both fighters. She could feel Thex's rage and pain, but also something else: hope. For the first time since his capture, he believed he could win. The turning point came when the Loveless champion overextended during an attack, confident in its superior technology. Thex grabbed the warrior's arm and twisted, his natural strength finally overcoming the artificial enhancements. Cybernetic components sparked and failed. What followed was swift and decisive. Without its technological advantages, the Loveless champion was just another warrior, and Thex had been fighting for his life longer than most beings lived. The final blow sent the champion crashing into the bay wall, unconscious and defeated. The silence that followed was deafening. Loveless soldiers stood in shock, unable to process that their perfect warrior had been beaten by a slave. The refugees could hardly believe what they had witnessed. Then Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. The terms were clear. The combat is finished. You will leave this system and never return. The Loveless commander's response was immediate and predictable. Unacceptable. The combat was flawed. We demand a rematch with proper equipment. But Thex wasn't finished. The massive Korthani warrior stepped toward the Loveless soldiers, his wounds bleeding but his stance defiant. When he spoke, his voice carried across the bay like thunder. I am Thex of Korthan, last son of a dead world. I have fought in your arenas. I have killed your champions. I have earned the right to speak. He gestured toward the unconscious Loveless fighter. Your warrior is defeated. Your terms are met. Honor your agreement or face the judgment of the galaxy. Something in his words, or perhaps the sight of their supposedly invincible champion lying broken on the deck, seemed to penetrate even Loveless arrogance. The commander stood silent for long moments, calculating odds and consequences. Finally, the Loveless leader spoke. The agreement will be honored, but this will not be forgotten. As the Loveless forces withdrew from Haven Station, Zara felt a surge of emotions she could barely process. Relief, amazement, gratitude, and something else. A sense that she had witnessed something historic. A turning point where the oppressed had finally stood up to their oppressors and won. But more than that, she had seen how the humans' compassion and determination could inspire others to become more than they thought possible. Thex had been a broken gladiator when they rescued him. Today he had become a hero. 3 weeks later, Zara stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching ships arrive and depart in the busy space lanes around the hidden facility. She still couldn't quite believe this place existed, built into a massive asteroid in an uncharted system. Haven Station was a secret refuge for escaped slaves and beings fleeing oppression throughout the galaxy. The humans had established it only 8 months ago, but it already housed over 10,000 refugees from dozens of different worlds. What amazed Zara most was how efficiently everything ran. There were medical facilities, schools, workshops, gardens, and even entertainment areas. The humans had somehow created a functioning society from nothing. Incredible, isn't it? Zara turned to find Marcus approaching with 2 cups of coffee, another human beverage she had grown to enjoy. He had become something like a friend over the past weeks, helping her adjust to life at the station and learn the human language. She was making good progress with English, though she still relied on translation devices for complex conversations. I still don't understand how you built all this so quickly, Zara said, accepting the coffee gratefully. The logistics alone must have been enormous, Marcus smiled. That's the thing about humans. When we decide to do something, we tend to go all in. Plus, we had help from local species who were already fighting slavery in their own ways. We just gave them a central location to coordinate from. Through the observation window, Zara could see a familiar ship docking at one of the landing bays. It was another rescue vessel returning from a mission. Over the past weeks, she had watched dozens of such ships come and go, each one bringing more survivors to safety. Any word about Jane? She asked, trying to keep hope out of her voice. Marcus had been checking with every rescue team and contact network, but so far there had been no sign of her brother. Actually, that's why I came to find you, Marcus said, his expression serious. We got a communication this morning from one of our undercover agents in the Kalos mining system. There's a Qatari male matching Jane's description working in the lithium mines on Kalos 3. Zara's heart leaped, then sank just as quickly. The Kalos system is heavily fortified. Even if it is him, how could we possibly get him out? We're working on that, Marcus said. Captain Rodriguez is putting together a special mission. It's risky, but we think we can do it. Before Zara could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and an announcement echoed over the communication system in multiple languages. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Marcus's expression grew grim. That's a Veilith detection alarm. Someone found us. They rushed to the command center where screens displayed tactical information about the approaching threat. Captain Rodriguez, the gray-haired man Zara had met on the rescue ship, was coordinating the station's response. Other humans and aliens worked frantically at control consoles. Report, Marcus called out as they entered. 3 Veilith destroyers. Approaching fast, Rodriguez replied without taking his eyes off the main display. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Zara felt sick. Haven Station had defensive systems, but nothing that could stand up to 3 destroyers. The Veilith ships were massive, heavily armed, and designed specifically for destroying installations like this one. Evacuation protocol is already in effect, Rodriguez continued. We're loading the civilians onto transport ships as fast as possible. But with 10,000 people, he didn't need to finish. There wasn't enough time to evacuate everyone and not enough transport ships to carry them all even if there was. What about fighting back? Asked Dr. Sarah, who had just arrived with several other medical staff. Not an option, Rodriguez said grimly. We might damage one of their ships, but they'd still level this place. Our only hope is to get as many people out as possible before they arrive. Zara watched the chaos in the command center and felt a familiar despair settling over her. Just when she had found hope again, it was being ripped away. The Veilith would destroy Haven Station just like they had destroyed her world. Thousands of refugees who had finally found safety would be killed or enslaved again. But then she noticed something that surprised her. Despite the desperate situation, the humans weren't panicking. They worked with calm efficiency, focusing on saving lives rather than lamenting their fate. Even facing certain death, they were putting others first. Marcus was coordinating with the transport ships, prioritizing families with children and injured refugees. Sarah was organizing medical supplies for the evacuation. Other humans throughout the command center were making similar sacrifices, ensuring that the most vulnerable people got out first. I want to help, Zara said suddenly. Rodriguez looked at her with surprise. You should be on one of the first transports out of here. You're a rescued refugee. Our whole purpose is keeping people like you safe. My whole people are gone except possibly my brother, Zara replied. These refugees are my people now. If you're staying to help them escape, then I'm staying too. Marcus started to protest, but Zara cut him off. I know this station better than most of the new arrivals. I can help guide them to the transport bays. And my people's emotional sensitivity might be useful. I can tell who's most likely to panic and need extra help. Rodriguez studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. But if things go bad, you get on the last transport out. That's an order. Zara spent the next 15 minutes moving through the station's residential areas, helping coordinate the evacuation. Her ability to sense emotions proved invaluable. She could identify children who were too scared to leave their hiding places, elderly beings who were too proud to ask for help, and families who were paralyzed by fear. The humans had trained the refugees for this possibility, and most evacuation procedures went smoothly. But there were always complications. A Threxian family couldn't find their youngest child. An elderly Corvin refused to leave without his collection of books from his destroyed homeworld. A group of Zilaran teenagers had barricaded themselves in their quarters, convinced they were safer hiding than running. In each case, Zara was able to help. She found the missing child hiding in a supply closet. She convinced the elderly Corvin that his knowledge was more valuable than his books. She talked the teenagers through their fear and got them moving toward the transports. But time was running out. The Veilith ships were only 5 minutes away when the last transport ship sealed its airlocks and prepared to launch. Zara was supposed to be on it, but she was still in the station's lower levels helping a group of injured refugees reach the docking bay. She made it to the transport platform just as the ship's engines fired up. Through the viewing port, she could see Marcus frantically gesturing for her to hurry, but between her and the ship were a dozen refugees who couldn't move fast enough to make it aboard. Zara made a choice that would have seemed impossible to her 6 months ago. Instead of running for the ship, she turned back to help the slowest refugees. An ancient Kethari female who reminded her of her grandmother. A young Threxian male who had lost his leg in a mining accident. A Zillaran mother carrying twin babies. Go, she shouted to Marcus through the viewing port. Get them out of here. She saw the anguish in his eyes, but he understood. The transport ship launched, carrying refugees to safety while Zara and the others watched from the station. The Valeth destroyers were now visible through the station's main windows, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. In minutes, they would open fire and turn Haven Station into debris. But as Zara helped the remaining refugees toward emergency shelters deep in the asteroid, she realized something important. For the first time since losing her family, she had chosen to put others before herself. She had acted with the same selfless courage she had seen in the humans. The Valeth might destroy this place, but they couldn't destroy what it represented: hope, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. These things would survive as long as beings like the humans existed. And maybe, just maybe, some of that humanity had rubbed off on her too. The strange being moved with purpose and efficiency that impressed Zara. Within minutes, all the prison cells were open and the survivors were gathering near the hole in the hull. Some prisoners were too weak or scared to move, but the rescuer was patient with each one. It spoke softly to the frightened Zillaran child and helped the elderly Threxian to his feet. Through the hole, Zara could see another ship docked against the slave vessel. It was sleek and white, completely different from the brutal gray design of Valeth ships. Warm light spilled out from its airlock, and she could see more beings in similar uniforms moving around inside. "My name is Marcus," the rescuer said, somehow making himself understood despite the language barrier. "We're humans. We're here to help, humans." Zara had never heard of this species before. They weren't in any of the galactic databases she remembered from her studies on Ketha. That meant they were either very new to space, travel, or they came from somewhere far beyond the known regions. Marcus gestured for the prisoners to start moving toward his ship. Some hesitated, afraid this might be another trap. The Valeth were known for their cruel games. But Zara looked into Marcus's eyes again and saw only sincerity. Her people's emotional sensitivity was both a curse and a gift. She could feel that this human genuinely wanted to help them. She stepped forward first and others followed her lead. Marcus helped each person across the gap between ships, his hands steady and strong. When it was Zara's turn, she felt an odd sensation as he touched her arm. Her people could sense emotions through physical contact. But with Marcus it was different. Instead of the usual flood of feelings, she felt something warm and protective. It reminded her of how her father used to make her feel safe. Inside the human ship, more surprises waited. The corridor was clean and bright, with soft lighting that didn't hurt their eyes after months in the dim slave vessel. Other humans were waiting with blankets, medical supplies, and what looked like food. Real food, not the nutrient paste they had been surviving on. A female human with short red hair approached Zara. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile that somehow conveyed welcome without words. She handed Zara a warm blanket and a cup of something that smelled wonderful. Zara took a careful sip and almost cried. It was hot soup, rich and nourishing, unlike anything she had tasted in months. The humans were clearly prepared for this rescue operation. They had medical scanners, translation devices, and even clothing in various sizes for different species. But what amazed Zara most was their attitude. They weren't treating the rescued slaves like burdens or problems to be solved. They were treating them like people who mattered. Marcus was talking to another human, a man with gray hair who seemed to be in charge. Zara caught fragments of their conversation through a translation device one of the humans had given her. They were discussing safe locations, medical needs, and something called refugee protocols. "Captain," Marcus was saying, "the Valeth ship has no survivors among the crew. The automated distress signal brought us just in time." The captain nodded grimly. "How many prisoners?" 47. "Various species. Some are in bad shape, but they'll all recover with proper care." Zara listened with growing amazement. These humans had come specifically to rescue slaves. They had attacked a Valeth ship, one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy, just to save people they had never met. It made no logical sense. What did they gain from this? As if reading her thoughts, the female human with red hair sat down beside her. The translation device made her words clear. "You're wondering why we're doing this?" Zara nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "Because it's the right thing to do," the woman said simply. "My name is Sarah, by the way. I'm the ship's medical officer." But you don't even know us, Zara managed to whisper. We're from different worlds, different species. Why risk your lives? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. On our world, we have a saying. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We learned about slavery in this galaxy 6 months ago when we first made contact with other species. We decided we couldn't just stand by and watch. The concept was so alien to Zara that she struggled to understand it. In her experience, species looked out for their own. The strong conquered the weak. Mercy was a luxury that few could afford. But these humans seemed to operate by entirely different rules. Around the ship's common area, other conversations were happening through translation devices. The young Zilaran girl was showing a human woman pictures she had drawn on a small tablet. An elderly Corvan male was discussing agriculture with a human engineer. Slowly, the rescued prisoners were beginning to relax. But Zara noticed something else. The humans weren't just being kind, they were being smart about it too. They kept their distance from prisoners who seemed overwhelmed. They offered help without forcing it. They respected personal space and cultural differences. This wasn't random kindness. It was organized, systematic compassion. Marcus approached her again, this time with a datapad. We're trying to figure out where everyone wants to go, he explained. Some species have refugee colonies. Others have family members on different worlds. What about you? Zara's throat tightened. My world is gone. The Veilith destroyed it completely. I don't know if anyone from my family survived except maybe my brother. He was on another slave ship when we were separated. Marcus's expression grew serious. What's your brother's name? And what did the other ship look like? Hope flared in Zara's chest. His name is Jine. The ship was smaller than this one, with red markings on the hull. They said it was going to the mining colonies in the outer rim. Marcus made notes on his datapad. We'll put out word through our network. If he's out there, we'll find him. Your network? Other human ships, rescue operations, underground contacts. We've been building relationships with people who oppose slavery throughout this sector. It's amazing how many beings want to help once they know they're not alone. This revelation shocked Zara even more. The humans hadn't just randomly decided to rescue one ship. They were running an organized campaign against slavery itself. They were taking on the entire system. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the destroyed Veilith vessel behind, Zara found herself in the observation lounge watching the stars streak past. Other survivors had gathered there too, all of them processing what had happened. Do you think they're real? Asked Korvac, the old Threxian. Or is this some kind of dream? They're real, Zara said softly. I can feel their emotions. They genuinely care about us, but why? Asked the Zilaran child. Why do they care about strangers? Zara had been wondering the same thing. In the months since her capture, she had seen the worst that intelligent beings could do to each other. The Veilith were cold and efficient in their cruelty. The slave traders were motivated by greed. Even the guards seemed to enjoy causing pain. But these humans were different. They risked their lives for people they had never met, expecting nothing in return. They treated former slaves like honored guests. They offered hope instead of despair. Sarah appeared beside them, carrying cups of hot tea for everyone. You're all wondering about our motivations, she said with a gentle smile. It's just so unusual, Korvac said carefully. Most species focus on their own survival and prosperity. Humans are probably no different in that regard, Sarah admitted. But we learned something important in our own history. When people stand together against injustice, everyone becomes stronger. When we help others find freedom, we protect our own freedom too. She gestured toward the stars streaming past the window. This galaxy is vast and beautiful. There's room for everyone to live with dignity and hope, but that only happens when people choose to make it happen. As Zara listened to these words, she felt something she hadn't experienced since the destruction of her world. For the first time in months, she believed that tomorrow might be better than today. And for the first time since losing her family, she didn't feel completely alone. These humans had shown her that kindness still existed in the universe. More than that, they had shown her that it was possible to fight back against cruelty and win. Zara pressed her face against the cold metal wall of her cell, watching the stars through the tiny porthole. Each bright dot reminded her of everything she had lost. Her home planet Keitha was somewhere out there, probably nothing but space dust now. The Veilith Empire had made sure of that. The slave ship rocked gently as it moved through hyperspace. Around her, dozens of other beings from destroyed worlds sat in similar cells. Some cried softly. Others stared at nothing. A few had already given up completely and lay motionless on their thin sleeping mats. Zara was different from most of the prisoners. Her people, the Cathari, were known across the galaxy for their ability to feel emotions deeply, too deeply, some said. While other species might feel sad or angry, the Cathari experienced these emotions like physical pain. Love, joy, and happiness were equally intense. This gift had made her people wonderful artists, musicians, and healers. It had also made them easy targets. The Loveless had attacked without warning. Their emotionless soldiers had swept across Ketha like a plague. They felt no mercy, no guilt, no hesitation. Against such cold efficiency, the gentle Cathari had no chance. Zara had watched from her family's underground shelter as the orbital bombardment turned her beautiful world into a burning wasteland. She was one of only a few hundred survivors, all of them now slaves. A guard's footsteps echoed down the corridor. Zara quickly moved away from the porthole. The Loveless didn't like it when prisoners looked outside. They said it gave slaves false hope. The guard passed by without stopping, his gray skin and empty black eyes showing no interest in the suffering around him. Zara had been on this ship for 3 months now. She knew because she had been counting the meal deliveries. Twice a day they got a bowl of nutrient paste and a cup of water. It was enough to keep them alive, but not enough to make them strong. The Loveless were very good at keeping slaves weak but functional. In the cell next to hers, an old Threxian male named Korvac was teaching a young Zilaran girl how to meditate. The Threxians were naturally calm beings, and Korvac was trying to help others find peace in this terrible situation. Zara had tried his methods, but her Cathari nature made it impossible. Every emotion hit her like a hammer blow. She missed her family with an ache that felt like dying. Her parents had been killed in the first wave of attacks. Her younger brother, Jane, had been separated from her when they were captured. She didn't even know if he was still alive. The not knowing was almost worse than losing her parents. At least with them she had closure. With Jane, she could only hope and fear. The ship's destination was a mystery to most of the prisoners, but Zara had overheard enough guard conversations to piece it together. They were heading to Nexus Station, a massive trading hub controlled by the Loveless Empire. There they would be sold to whoever could pay the highest price. Some would go to mining operations on dead worlds. Others would become servants in wealthy households. The lucky ones might end up as laborers on agricultural planets. Zara knew she wouldn't be lucky. Her Cathari appearance made her valuable for a specific type of buyer. Her silver blue skin and large violet eyes were considered exotic by many species. Worse, her people's emotional sensitivity made them prized as entertainment slaves. Rich beings would buy Cathari just to watch them suffer, feeding off their intense emotional reactions like vampires. The thought made her stomach turn. She had already decided she would rather die than become someone's emotional toy. But every time she considered ending her life, she thought of Jane. If there was even a tiny chance he was still alive, she had to keep going. She had to find him. A new sound echoed through the ship's hull. Not the usual hum of the engines or the clank of machinery. This was different. It sounded like weapons fire, but distant. Zara pressed her ear to the wall, trying to hear better. Other prisoners were doing the same thing, all of them suddenly alert. The lights flickered. Then the ship shuddered violently, throwing everyone against the walls of their cells. Emergency alarms began blaring. Through the chaos, Zara could hear shouting from the direction of the bridge. The Loveless guards were yelling orders in their harsh language. Another impact, stronger this time. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated, making Zara feel sick. Whatever was happening, it wasn't part of the normal journey. They were under attack. Hope flickered in Zara's chest, then died just as quickly. Even if someone destroyed this ship, the prisoners would die with it. The cells were locked tight and there was no way out. At best, they would suffocate when life support failed. At worst, they would be vaporized when the ship exploded. But then something unexpected happened. The lights went out completely, plunging the prisoner section into total darkness. In that darkness, Zara heard a sound that made no sense. The hiss of cutting tools. Someone was cutting through the hull from outside. A brilliant white light suddenly blazed through a hole in the far wall. Sparks flew as the cutting continued, making a perfect circle in the metal. When the section fell away, Zara saw something that made her heart race. A figure in a strange white and blue uniform was climbing through the hole. The being was unlike anything she had ever seen. Roughly humanoid, but different from any known species. It had pale pinkish skin and brown hair that covered only the top of its head. When it turned toward the cells, Zara saw its eyes. They were small compared to most sapient species, but there was something in them that took her breath away. Warmth, kindness, determination. The being moved quickly from cell to cell, using some kind of energy tool to melt through the locks. It wasn't wearing any kind of breathing equipment, which meant it could survive in the same atmosphere as the prisoners. When it reached Zara's cell, it looked directly at her and said something in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow she understood the meaning. It was asking if she was hurt. Zara shook her head, not trusting her voice. The being smiled, and that simple expression contained more genuine warmth than she had felt since losing her family. In one quick motion, it melted her lock and pulled the door open. "Come," it said, and again the meaning was clear despite the foreign words. "We're getting you out of here." As Zara stepped out of her cell for the first time in months, she realized something incredible was happening. For the first time since the destruction of her world, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope.